Across the river, a few miles from the ranch, you and Crystal silently stroll beside each other. One caught up in worry, the other in contemplation, yet both of you unaware of being followed. Crystal tugged on your shirt sleeve when you came up to an intersection and stoplight. "I've never brought anyone back to the house with me before," she started, unsure of how to finish. You were... She struggled, sighed heavily, and looked away, then quickly changed tactics. "You met the forest witches. It's the only answer. They trusted you to help Crimea, so I have to. I can trust you too. I should expect you think I'm a terrible friend all these years, having never truly trusted you, huh?" You place a hand on her shoulder. She turned to meet your eyes, and you gently close them and shake your head. When you opened your eyes, tears came down Crystal's face, and she hugged you. "I live in the forest," she said, into your shirt. "Why don't you lead the way? If you think you can find the witches again, that is." She smiled, and dried her tears, and her nose, on your sleeve, as a prank, but also to put herself in a better mood. You recoil animatedly, but didn't actually care since you knew she needed to smile, and so played along. And smile she did. The smile kick-started the journey as Crystal nudged you into the river park beside the three-way pedestrian intersection where you had taken pause. You know the double LR is roughly east of here, so just keep going northeast till things look familiar. Normally I'd take the trails, but... She looked around and then whispered, "I think we're being followed. Plus I want to see if Kome and Kotake remember me." You abruptly stopped and looked around. "Shh," Crystal whispered. "Keep walking." You bent over to adjust your shoes, trying to look as nonchalant as possible, then continued. After nearly 2 miles of pathless forest, small unkempt trails started winding and braiding through the forest, and Crystal picked the path to walk. "We're close to the ranch. Does any of this look familiar?" Your response was clearer to you than to Crystal as you picked up the pace and started marching. You recognized the path the fairy had led you and began to jog, not only retracing the steps, but the pace you took as well. "Link, hey!" Crystal called out from behind. "Wait up!" she said as she began to chase after. As you neared the witch's hut, Crystal had sudden second thoughts. "Wait, maybe I should..." she started to mumble as Midna and Twyla emerged from the camouflaged forest home. "That's not Kome and Kotake," she whispered sternly. You smile back at her and emerged from the forestry, holding up a hand in a frozen wave for the twins. "Link!" Crystal shouted in a whisper. "Who's your friend?" Midna and Twyla mutually asked. You turned around to smile at Crystal, who hesitantly approached. Then, with a combination of courage and anger, approached Midna and Twyla directly. "Where's Kome and Kotake?" "Where's Kome and Kotake? They've lived here all my life, and I've never met you two." The twins exchanged a glance, mixing concern with doubt. "We've lived here with our aunts all our lives, and we've never met you." Kotake emerged on her broomstick from the tree home, half cackling, half scolding, half teasing. Uncharacteristically plain speaking, she carried on. "Enough! None of you children remember each other because you were too little." Kome, rather, used her magic to appear beside her sister with a puff of smoke and a cackle. Kotake turned to glare at her. "It's no surprise you'd forget, such rivals you were." Kome spoke, ignoring her twin's glare. Both Kome and Kotake looked towards you and greeted you simultaneously. "Hello, Link." All of you went inside the tree home and were greeted with the sweet and pungent smell of brewing potion mushrooms. "Crimea is doing well, no? We must apologize, my sister and I. It is tragic," Kotake began, followed by Kome. "You see, Crimea is one of the few remaining Hylians who are sensitive enough to be affected by the subtle workings of magic." Taking turns talking. "We had maintained a long and lasting friendship with her after we showed her how to make her own potions. But as the years went by, they swapped. The mushrooms ran dry, and we have been searching for them all over the forest to give her, without a problem, until 3 years ago." Twyla and Midna cut in. "That's when a lot of strange things started happening here in the forest, in the corners and dead ends of Hyrotropolis, around the depths of Lake Hylia and its shores, and in the Gerudo Desert wastes, and even deep within Death Mountain. Here, the forest denizens have taken up to eating all of our mushrooms and uprooting as many bushes as they can find. In the desert, our family has stopped contacting us. The last thing we heard was they were run out of their home and left to survive in the wastes. A lot of activity in the last 3 years has left our dear aunts terrified of the implications. Their concern for their aunts was both touching and insulting, to which Kome snapped, "Terror nothing! We're not scared, just concerned." Which Kotake argued, "Concerned enough to stay locked in our home in the woods and staying well out of sight." They began to bicker, hovering on their broomsticks, shaking spoons at each other, heading back to the cauldron. "Which?" one snapped as they dispatched the brew into separate bottles, followed by "Hag!" from the other. Twyla and Midna both turned to each other and agreed, "Don't ever let me get like that," simultaneously. Back outside, Twyla and Midna hovered over the dead and ashen fire pit. Crystal and Link sat across from each other around it, and the four of them chatted about what they were going to do. No one could come up with any answers, and Crystal remembered she needed to get home. "We'll take you," said Twyla and Midna. "Thanks, really," Crystal started, "but we'll be fine. Take care of your aunts. Link will take me home. Right, Link?" she finished, nodding to you, nodding to her. You all waved to each other, and the twins retreated into the house, and you and Crystal disappeared on the trails leading back to her home. "We should hurry. Lead on. That way," Crystal directed. Deep in the woods, the trail started to become overgrown, and Crystal stopped you. "Hold on, we're almost there, but this is where it gets tricky. We have landmarks we have to remember to find the house. No visible trails will lead there." Crystal took the lead and beckoned you to follow her. You passed a few hollow and creepy-looking trees, wrapped around a boulder which hid another tree just off an overgrown path from another nearby park, a fishing hole. She wound around the warped trees, then the larger fat tree, which blocked the view of a small slope into an underground chasm behind it, leading further off the beaten path and well beyond sight. As you descended behind the tree, they were out of your sight and you out of theirs. A purple brawler emerged from behind while he lost sight of your path. He stood around awkwardly, looking for the two kids he'd just lost. He peeked into the bushes and around large boulders, scratched his head, then belted out loudly and angrily in defeat before pushing along the trail in hopes of finding his targets. "What was that?" Crystal said, looking back toward the distant but sharp and angry outburst from behind you. You looked back a moment, turned, and shrugged, then push on. The tiny chasm was easy to enter from behind the fat tree, but the ceiling began to close up overhead almost immediately. You were in more of a crawl space of a tunnel than a mere crack in the ground, and had to crouch in places. If we kept on the trail back there, we'd eventually wrap around back toward the river. Great fishing spot that way. There are also forest Zoras who live near there. They seem to keep to themselves, but they are said to be very dangerous if provoked. No one knows much else about them, though, not even Ruto. The tunnel chasm began to open up ahead, and sunlight poured in, along with shadows of branches. Tapering into the earth was a giant rock jutting in like a sheathed dagger, leaving the exit with a steep climb. "Careful here, it's easier leaving home than coming back," Crystal giggled. She veered off to the side and used a thick vine to stabilize her climb up the steep rock face, then tossed the vine in your direction when she got to the top. "It's easier on the side, but as long as you keep a hold of the vine, you'll be fine," she said, gesturing to the left side she'd climbed, then climbed down on the other side. When you reached the top, Crystal was nowhere in sight, while a large log cabin sat in the middle of a sunny glade surrounded by thick stone and fat trees, submerged in a steep bowl-shaped depression in the earth. One way in, one way out. The front door sat ajar, and you suddenly feel an irrational tug of panic in your chest. You quickly clamber down and run to the front door with haste. You bolt through the door and fall over Crystal, rolling into her mother and knocking her to the floor as well. Crystal fumed, more confused than furious. "Link, what was that all about? You just knocked my mom to the floor!" Her mother began laughing. A rounder, curvy woman with long, braided green hair and a nearly identical face to her daughter. Crystal grinned and stood up, offering her hand to her mother so she could help her up as well. You stay on the floor, too embarrassed to get back up. Mom, this is my friend, Link. We met. Her mother interrupted her with a stiff, upright, open palm. I remember, Link. You two first met when you were too little to remember. It's nice to see that you've reconnected and become friends again. She smiled. Crystal was sarcastic. At the shop? On his birthday? Oh, my name is Surrey of the 11th. Her mom distracted. The women in our family have all been named after our ancestor because she had been a sage of the forest temple, and I'm the 11th generation. Crystal's father named her before I had a chance to explain any of this, so we left it at that. She trailed off. Crystal hugged Saria. It's okay, Mom. I love my name as much as I love yours. Saria smiled half-heartedly, then realized Crystal was explaining something important before everyone found themselves on the floor. Oh, what was that about closing the shop early, Chris? You've never had trouble with customers before, Crystal interrupted. It wasn't a customer exactly, but something happened to distract me, and without focus, it would have been all of the customers. So I figured it'd be better off if we closed early rather than had bad service all day. Saria was still confused and becoming a little upset. I don't understand. What could have possibly distracted you all day long? Was there an electrical short in one of the light switches, or the register get stuck again? Saria folded her arms. You know how to fix the cash register, dear. Crystal was getting impatient. It wasn't anything technical. And she looked over to you in hopes that you could bail her out. Her urgent look was enough to do the trick, though for the wrong reasons. Her mother snickered. It's okay, I'll let it go. Just don't make a habit out of it, okay? Maybe you can teach Link how to run the shop together. She winked. Crystal suddenly realized that her mother was trying to hint at something romantic and groaned loud and long. Mom! Then pushed her mother into the kitchen. Link, you know the way? I think you ought to go home. She vainly fought herself from blushing. You smile and wave at them on your way into the kitchen. Leave the cabin and close the door behind you. Then take a deep breath. You stepped off the porch and looked into the trees and skies overhead. Another sigh of relief. Then took off at a steady pace. You backtracked from the cabin to the crevice, back to the overgrown path, and cautiously peeked around the tree and boulder. When you were sure no one was around, you hurried down the path towards the ranch, running as quietly as possible. In your haste, you catch up with a furious and shady fellow, and slow down, trying to keep your distance. The man stomped and shouted quietly at himself as he trudged along. So you held back and waited, giving the man ample time to put distance between you. More casually now, you take the path's scenery and atmosphere in as you stroll, enjoying the feel of the woods. This casual pace made the departure trip thrice as long as your arrival time, and the sun was careening into the west, nearly exhausting the afternoon. Emerging from the woods, close to the ranch, you could see a group of brawlers gathered by the intersection where you and Crystal had entered the woods. Waiting to see what they were doing, you assure yourself they weren't a threat only after several of them dispersed into town and only two remained, casually jeering at traffic. After waiting so long, you finally travel back across the bridge into downtown. As you pass the two remaining brawlers, you hear one of them mutter something about you being a little green punk. Up ahead, on the opposite end of the bridge, you could barely make out a dark figure, hopping over the railing and vanishing. You run ahead to get a better view, then slow down and watch once you are close enough to make out the ninja rap crawling alongside the edge of the bridge. You watch, fascinated by the grace by which this mysterious person leapt from the bridge into the trees nearby and vanished toward the skate park. You ran ahead again and followed the bridge across the side path to halfway across before you were confronted by a museum separating the bridge path to the main intersection by the front of the park from the street below, bordering the rear. You hurry down here to the park, but could make no sign of any mysterious ninjas in the area. Goron Link on patrol, the familiar blue van under the bridge had just arrived, and several newly familiar faces started to show up from around downtown for the free food. You decide to stick around, and people watch again. You wander over to the other end of the park from the bridge on the empty end, and get comfy in a quiet corner bench. Goron Link stopped to chat with a couple on a stroll. Zelda hurried back and forth under the bridge. No sign of brawlers or mafia. The sun was starting to light the dusk horizon with orange and yellow hues, and no signs of ninjas either. You decided to stretch out and stood up in front of the bench, doing a few stretches, forward bends, side twists, and deep breathing. As the couple departed from Goron Link, he raised his hands in a cheer and let out an audible Yahoo! As he gobbled up a small gift. You smile to yourself and touch your toes and inhale deep. The park breathed and sighed as people came to eat and dispersed slowly into the falling dusk. You remained mostly by the park bench all evening and approached the van under the bridge only at the very end of the feed. Impa was washing the fold-out tables and gathering up any napkins, utensils, plates, or other resources left behind as Zelda loaded them into the van or threw away rubbish. You walk around one table, toward the van, and wait as Zelda loaded a box of canned chili into the back. She heard your approach and turned around to face you, standing awkwardly beside. You stared at each other for a moment, and Impa noticed, waiting for Zelda to return. Finally, she approached and formally introduced herself, and Zelda. Hello, Link. You've grown a lot since we were last together. I am Zelda's attendant, Impa. Zelda noticed herself staring at you and interrupted Impa. I don't suppose you'd remember me, either. I barely remember you when we were so little, she trailed off. My name is Zelda. We were all really little when our parents last met together at the Double LR. I remember you, Link, and our friends, Ruto, Crystal, Malin, and the twins, Twyla and Midna. I think Marin is the only one of us old enough to remember anything more than that, though. Impa had resumed the cleanup while Zelda talked. She mentioned playing games with each other at the ranch long ago, drinking fresh milk straight from the cows, chasing cuckoos, and expressed enjoying the wonders of meeting horses for the first time. No more than 2 minutes in, Impa cleared her throat and indicated toward the tables and gas stoves. Zelda politely excused herself, but you helped by carrying the collapsible tables into the back of the van. Impa thanked you for your help and entered the driver's seat while Zelda lingered to talk. Thank you for the help, Link. I hope you can come help us tomorrow evening. I can even give you Impa's cell number so you can stay in touch with me. You take the number she wrote down and waited awkwardly. Impa broke the silence and called for Zelda. You waved goodbye as Zelda climbed in, waving back, and they drove off. Before you could, or perhaps would, turn around to return home, a cyan racer sped past and followed the van for a moment before revving past them and disappearing. You looked back in the direction the car had come and noticed some cyan racers' jumpsuits walking toward the park from the formerly brawler shops across the street. Goron Link had noticed, too, and approached you under the bridge. Gently but sternly, he said, Relax, kid. They're just leaving. You should go home, too. There was solemn gravel in his voice. You headed back toward home while fiddling with your new phone, sent a text to Mom with the time and your location, then sent another asking to add Crystal and Zelda's phone numbers to your contact list along with at least Impa's number. Along the trip home, you noticed the same old lady with the blanket shawl walking out of a small store near home and decided to take a look inside. The shop owner was a kind, stocky man with a shiny widow's peak forehead, lustrous blue hair on the side and back of his head, and a happy demeanor. He turned and greeted you, right away revealing a large yellow fox mask. Hello, lad! He nearly boomed from behind the mask, perhaps trying to startle the kids who came in, or just thinking he needed to compensate more than necessary for his voice behind the mask. Still loudly, but muffled. You have the look of a smart kid, so I'll tell you a little secret. He placed the reverse side of his hand beside his mask, pushing it aside to show his mouth, and leaned in as you approached the counter, lowering his voice theatrically. There's a magical mask salesman coming to town soon, and he'll be setting up shop in here. I've got a special deal to promote him by giving away this free mask. You smile and put out your hands, but the shopkeep continued, pulling back and letting the mask fall over his mouth again. But there's a catch, you see. I need to make a living here, yeah? He spoke up again to compensate for his muffled voice. I can't give too many away for free, so it's more like a job. I'm passing the torch. If you want the mask, you just gotta wear it and try to sell it. If you come back with the money, I can either let you keep the same mask for free, or I can give you a new one to try to sell. How do you like that? After rolling your head back and forth in thought, you nod and reach for the mask from the man. He then introduced himself as Café, relinquishing the mask and stroking his newly revealed and strangely blue beard. And that is the Keaton mask. It represents the tricky fox from old stories. Maybe you remember some of them. Then he asked if you were here to buy anything from the shop. You decided you had to look around some more to see what there was. You noticed small and medium bottles, a wooden sword and shield practice set, a large old Hyrulean wallet, and traditional hunter's tunic, medium and large sizes. As you started to leave, Café asked, "You see anything you like? There's a special discount for employees, you know." "Sell the mask, all right?" He said, smiling. Smiling, you nodded and left for home, wearing the Keaton mask. You traveled the short trip home, entering the house, when you received your answer to the text about your friends. It was a yes. "Oh, good, you're home. Whoa, what are you?" The mask frightened a sudden response when your mom emerged from the kitchen, so you took it off. You both sat on the couch and laughed. It was payday, and you received your allowance of 20R. Your mom took your Game Boy and entered the requested information, then thanked you for giving her a time and location update. "And since you're proving you can be responsible," she said, as she gave you 2 blue 5R bills, "your allowance just got a 5R raise and a one-time today bonus." You two exchanged a hug, and then she asked about the mask, before you retired to bed, while she was mentioning something about a Keaton story she grew up with, where he had tricked a man into becoming a scrub, and the Deku man used a circle of bushes to trap Keaton there. The weekend had arrived, and the slow weekend mornings in Hyrule meant everyone usually slept in or stayed indoors until lunchtime or later. You took advantage of the vacant mornings every morning to practice parkour, waking up extra early today for some reason. Probably due to all the excitement about the new Zelda box set, and your own coincidental experiences as of late. You were up before the sun had even begun to creep out from behind the horizon, and crept about the house softly so as not to wake your mother. Downstairs to the fridge for some milk, quietly putting handfuls of cereal into a bowl, and putting the milk back, ever gently closing the fridge as to make no sounds. You ate quickly and as quietly as possible, before taking off. Out the front door, on the front step, you held your breath as you closed the door slowly, as if taking an hour wasn't quite enough. You stretched yourself out as you walked, taking extra long strides and walking extra slow toward downtown for your weekend free run. You looked forward to each run, but this would be the first time going into the city. Usually you'd either run laps around your house or just go to Ruto's house and back, or just stay and hang out with your friend. Perhaps it was the recent drama and stimulation, but you were feeling extra adventurous and decided to explore downtown beyond the mall and skate park. Halfway there, the familiar blanket shawl obscures a misfortunate soul hiding behind a tree, asleep. You wadded up and left some of that worthless money for her, both 5R bills. You felt a sense of pride when you walked away and smiled. You decided you were close enough to downtown and began really warming up and started jogging. Your travel time drastically changed the morning for you. For one thing, you'd have been running from the house from the beginning if you were going to Ruto's. But because you were not as familiar with the downtown maze of streets, you'd need all the energy you could get, at the expense of the morning lull, you realized. Once the sun started announcing himself, you felt pressured to begin your delayed run. Your increased pace wasn't satisfactory enough. You wanted to run already.